What's up, guys? Welcome back to Living My Channel, where I talk to you all about how I'm living my American dream. So today, I want to talk to you about emotional maturity. Now, professor, psychologist, neuroscientist Ethan Kross, he's a professor at the University of Michigan. He calls this psychological distance, but I think the more commonly used term is emotional maturity. Now, I'll tell you why he calls it psychological distance. He calls it psychological distance because it's the idea of being able to detach yourself mentally, psychologically, from a moment, from an experience, from an emotion. Being able to just, yes, understand that there's an emotion, there's a feeling there, but detaching yourself from it so that you can make decisions that are not necessarily influenced by emotions, especially when they're negative emotions. Now, before I move on, it's important to understand that psychological distance or emotional maturity does not mean that you should just block out all your emotions. One of the things that I'm trying to preach, or that I'm definitely trying to grow within myself, but I'm trying to encourage in others now, especially men, is vulnerability, being able to be open and share your emotions. And that's difficult to do. I talk about it in a couple videos that I've made recently. I'll link them up here so you can watch those. So I'm not saying you should detach yourself from your emotions completely. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel, you shouldn't experience anger, pain, joy, all of these things. You should feel all those things. But it's important to keep them in context so that they don't completely control you. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I've had many times in the past where people, when I say people, really I'm saying like people I've dated, relationships I've been in, where people have said that I act like a robot. And here's what I mean. There's been many times where that we'll be in a heated discussion, or we would have been in a heated discussion, and things happen where maybe I should be showing some sort of stress, like I should be distraught, I should be sad. Maybe people expect me to cry, and I don't do that. I tend to keep a very just like blank look. My tone of voice completely changes to where I guess I sound like a robot. I'm very monotone, and the reason I do that is because I know that I am a very impatient person. I know that I can be somebody who feels anger at a very high level. And because I know that about myself, when I start to feel those things, I try very hard to keep them in check, to keep them in control. Because I know that if I allow myself to go to that next level, to where I'm letting the anger, the pain, those negative emotions take over, that I'm gonna act out in a way that I know is not right. I may curse somebody out, I may scream, I may do things that I know in my heart of hearts is not good. So because of that, I do a very hard job, I guess, where I focus very much on trying to control those emotions, on trying to separate myself from them and not feel them in that moment. And because of that, I've been accused of being a robot or coming off like a robot. But again, it's because I don't want to react out of that pain, out of those negative emotions. Now, I still feel them, and the bad thing is, for a long time, I would feel that, but I would never express it any other way. I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't seek help from counselors, friends, pastors, ministers, whatever. And so I just kind of bottled it all up inside, and it would eat me up, and it would just make things worse. So that's bad. You should find a way to vent. You should find a way to express those emotions. What you don't want to do is express those emotions in the heat of the moment, in the middle of an argument. Because when you do that, again, you're likely to do or say something that you can't take back. And a lot of times we don't realize how bad something's going to be in the moment because we're just expressing ourselves through our emotions. We don't realize how bad things are going to be until it's too late. Now, here's the thing. Not focusing on negative feelings, allows me, and it can allow you, to focus on solutions. So I talked before about my experiences going through divorce, and I'll link that video above so you can watch that video. But I think back to when I was going through my divorce, and there were definitely a lot of tough times. A lot of times where all I could do was cry. I would just sit in my room and just kind of stare at the wall and just think how did I get here, I always imagined myself to be this happily ever after kind of marriage and raising my child and all these things. So I had a lot of these moments of doubt, moments of pain, where I just felt lost. And I had to learn to, yes, feel that, but I had to learn to deal with those emotions in a positive way. And in order to do that, I had to, again, detach myself from those feelings, from those negative emotions, so that I could try to think of positive ways, positive actions that I could take to get myself out of that situation. Because here's the thing. I heard this quote recently. Unfortunately, I can't remember where I heard it, but it's a really good quote. And it said, I think it was Steve Harvey actually. It might have been a video I saw on Instagram or something like that. But he said something along the lines of, if you're going through hell, keep going. Now, if you stop there, it doesn't make sense, right? But here's the last part. Because why would you stop while you're in hell? Why would you not want to do everything you can to get out? So it's kind of the same thing. If you're stuck in this negative emotion, you've got to find a way to keep going in a positive way. Because you don't want to be stuck in that moment. You don't want to be stuck in those negative emotions. But the only way you can do that is to detach yourself from those. I went through the same thing with long distance parenting. I'm going through that right now. I've been separated from my ex for 9 years now. That's 9 years where I've been away from my son. Now he's about to turn 18 this year, so he'll be off doing his own thing, going to college and living his adult life. So for us parents, that's going to happen at some point where our kids are going to go off and do their own thing. But it's very hard to accept that when they're still small, when they're still living at home. But the fact that he's living with his mom, and me being in the military, I've been stationed in Japan, I've been stationed in California. Fortunately now I'm in Illinois, so I'm a little bit closer to him, 2.5 hours away. But there's been many times where I've been far away, I've been deployed, and I have to spend so much time away from him. And again, I had to think of positive things that I could do, not only to make the situation better, but to help me feel better. So for example, when I was deployed, or when I lived far away, I had alarms set on my phone. It's because of the time difference. Hey, call your son at this time, call your son at this time, every single day. Now some of you might say, well, if you're married to you wouldn't have to set alarms. But again, with the time difference, being in different countries, it helped me, especially when working 18 hours a day in some of those deployments. So that was a positive action that I could take to help the situation be a little bit better. It wasn't perfect. I was still feeling the pain of being away from my son, but it helped in a small way of how to deal with that. Another thing that I'm going through right now is dealing with teenagers. So both of my boys are teenagers, 17 and a 15-year-old. And there are many moments where dealing with a teenager can be extremely frustrating. If you've got kids, you probably know. Or just think back to you when you were a teenager. Think about some of the heartaches and pains that you give your parents, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's times where we'll be having conversations, and I'll say something and they disagree, and I want to say, hey, listen, you don't know any better because you're 17 years old. I've been there. I've made these mistakes. Listen from me. I know what I'm talking about. And I get frustrated because I'm trying to do what I think is the right thing. I'm trying to give them advice. I'm trying to help them, coach them, guide them towards a better future. And sometimes it seems like it's going in one ear and not the other, or maybe not even going in, it's just bouncing off. And they're completely reflecting or ignoring everything that I say. And it can get very frustrating. And my heart starts racing, and I feel anger coming up inside me. And I want to scream and I want to shout and just listen, I know what I'm talking about. But I know that if I do that if I raise my voice, that if I try to belittle them, or if I, just say some of the things that go through my head sometimes, I know that's only going to make things worse. And I don't want to make things worse. I want to be able to have these conversations with them. I want to be able to continue to offer them my advice, my thoughts on things. And the only way I can do that, or hope to do that, is by keeping them somewhat level so that they're actually willing to talk to me. Now, it doesn't always work. Even with adults, you can do the best you can, and it doesn't always work. But you're definitely not going to help the situation if you let your emotions and your anger take over you and you start arguing, screaming, or insulting this other person. So you have to detach yourself from the situation a little bit. I'll tell you two benefits that I have seen from being able to detach myself from the situation. First, and as I think back, I think I learned this from my dad, even though he never really talked about it or anything like that. But the first is that I get over negative emotions faster. So there's times where I'll be frustrated or angry about something, whether it's maybe a disagreement I had with my wife or something with my kids or something at work, something in my life frustrates me or upsets me. But what I've noticed is I get over that negative feeling relatively quickly, usually depending on the situation, obviously, but sometimes 30 minutes, an hour. And it's not like I forget about it, it's still there. But the negative feelings that I had when it first happened, they dissipate, they don't matter as much. So that's the first thing that I've noticed, is that I do get over things faster. The second thing that I've noticed that I think is huge for me is that, again, by detaching myself from the situation, I'm able to see possibilities. I'm able to start thinking a little bit more positive about the situation, or maybe not the situation in itself, but start to think more positive about future outcomes based on the actions that I take for that situation. So those are two things that I think are huge that have really helped me kind of keep things together. So what am I saying with all this? What's the point of me even talking to you about this? The whole point of this channel is to live the American dream. Now, I talked to you about how I'm living my American dream, but I want you to figure out how to live your American dream. And if you're constantly caught up in negative feelings, negative anything, you can't live the American dream. You can't focus on the good things in your life if you're spending all of your time focusing on the bad, or too much time dwelling on something bad that somebody said, or something bad that somebody did to you. You can't dwell on those moments and those feelings. You can't let those things control you, because you can't live the American dream that way. You just can't. So what I'm going to leave you with is this. You've got to learn to control your emotions. You've got to learn to detach yourself from those emotions. That's psychological distance that Dr. Ethan Kross talks about. You've got to learn to do that, because if you don't, what's going to happen is your emotions are going to control you. Now, that's great if your emotions are always happy-go-lucky, but that's not the case for most of us. Most of us are going to go through ups and downs, and those downs are where you're really going to be tested. And if you don't learn to control your emotions, they will control you. They can tear you down, and they're definitely going to keep you from living the American dream. All right, guys, that's all I'm going to leave you with. If you like the video, hit that like button. If you want to see more, subscribe so you know when I upload the next one. See you in the next video. Deuces.